So the new Ghost in the Shell trailer was released a few days ago, and it looked pretty promising. The visual style doesn't look half bad, Scarlett Johansson, debates of whitewashing aside, looks pretty badass as the Major, and they aren't shackling themselves to the original movie since they got their own original storyline.
Everything they told you was a lie.
Oh.
They created me, but they cannot control me.
Oh. This is bad.
In a cyberpunk world where we have yet another amnesia revenge plot, Ghost in the Total Recall, starring Jessica Bourne.
Alright, cliche dialogue that is Guantanamo Bay levels of torture aside, it's still too early to judge the full thing, but from what we can see, it certainly looks like they missed the mark for a Ghost in the Shell adaptation by focusing on a revenge amnesia backstory and not the deeper philosophical aspects the franchise is known for. And to me, that's a huge shame because this actually looks like the most promising live-action anime adaptation to come out in a long time. As anime fans, I'm sure we know that this medium is pretty much cursed when it comes to live-action adaptations in the West, to the point that for the critical mess that Batman vs Superman as a comic book movie was, it is still miles better than any anime adaptation we've gotten. Hell, even the Japanese themselves haven't managed to produce any decent adaptations aside from maybe Rurouni Kenshin, so it got me thinking of why anime can never seem to get a decent live-action adaptation, and what would it take to even make one? This is not a question of if anime should be adapted into live-action, as that's a topic for a different video entirely, and it's happening regardless of whether you want it to or not. But the more I thought about it, the more I realised it's not that difficult to understand, so I've managed to simplify it into 3 easy steps. Step 1. Cast white people in every role. Step 1. Understanding what it means to adapt something. Now this is one of the most hotly disputed topics, especially when it comes to anime adaptations of manga, but I think there have been enough examples now to show that a faithful adaptation doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good adaptation. What needs to be done first and foremost is that we, and whoever does the adapting, needs to throw away any preconceived notion that a 100% faithful adaptation is the best way to adapt something. And I've already talked about this topic when it comes to anime adaptations of manga and light novels in my source material is irrelevant video, so I will keep this brief. An adaptation needs to work in the medium it's being presented in, and this doesn't mean it needs to stay completely faithful or even that the source material will always be better. The author of Fight Club himself admitted that he liked the movies better than his own books. For the public dissatisfaction Stephen King voiced against The Shining, it still remains a cinematic classic and one of Kubrick's best, and this legendary corridor scene from Oldboy wasn't even in the manga it was adapted from. That's right, if Oldboy had stayed completely faithful to the manga, we wouldn't have gotten one of the greatest fight scenes in cinematic history. By shackling yourself to the source material too much, you risk tunnel visioning how to make the adaptation work the best, even if that means cutting things, changing plot points, and yes, this also does mean that if you cast a white woman as a cyborg in an international anime with a setting inspired by Hong Kong, you shouldn't get your jimmies ruffled too much. I feel like one of the most jarring aspects will be seeing a Japanese written story adapted with a Western style of storytelling, as there are very big differences to the point where if we see an anime that takes on a Western storytelling style, it immediately stands out from all the anime around it. If you need an example of just how different Eastern and Western style storytelling can be, you need look no further than with the 2006 Academy Award Best Picture, The Departed. Now it's not that well known that The Departed was actually based on the Hong Kong classic Infernal Affairs. Both films are very similar plot-wise, even sharing the same iconic scenes. But watching the versions side by side, it cannot be more apparent how differently each scene and the entire films were approached. Infernal Affairs emphasized the cooler and suave way of approaching things, often having scenes that are shot almost poetically which match the toned down and subtler characters, while The Departed framed everything as more gritty, grounded and real, giving it a unique stylish flavour only Scorsese can craft, and answering the toned down subtle characters by taking the script and adding approximately 3 fucks a minute.
Fucking motherfucker. Fucking fuck yourself.
Technically they are the same story, but they could not be told and shot more differently, and I chose this example because I think both versions are amazing films for completely different reasons, and goes to show that both sides have a different way of approaching things with their own strengths, which goes way beyond the location the thing is set. An anime done by Hollywood would most likely mean that it would be told with the Western storytelling style, which would be a bit weird but certainly not a bad thing. The marrying of Eastern and Western culture can produce some interesting results, and while there are plenty of good examples, my favourite of most recent recent time is the Korean film Train to Busan. Train to Busan takes a tired, overused concept of Western mainstream culture, zombies, and manages to make it feel fresh. It's a zombie movie with all the zombie cliches and tropes you've seen many times before, but what makes it work is that it's told with a very Eastern style of storytelling with very Eastern characters. That makes it feel very different from most other zombie movies without being any different on a surface level, and I absolutely loved it. It's a perfect marriage of East meets West, and if we flip this example over for an anime being adapted in the West, even if we are taking a Japanese story and adding Western elements to it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be a bad thing either. Different styles have different strengths, but one is not necessarily better than the other, which brings us to step 2. Choosing a franchise that lends itself to adaptation. We'd be dumb to think that every single franchise and story has the ability to be adapted well. Not saying we can't try, but you can make your job a hell of a lot easier by choosing something that could make the transition from anime to live action easily. To do this, we need to consider a variety of factors, but let's start with the most obvious. The visuals. Let's get this straight. A lot of anime looks weird, but it's fine because of the medium it's in. We have a greater suspension of disbelief when it comes to drawings because there's a greater disconnect. Weird and colourful hairstyles, strange creatures, over-the-top clothing. Anime can get away with these things and often make the designs look cool because it's a drawing and that's exactly what they were designed for. They don't have to be realistic or practical, but that doesn't mean that all that won't stick out like a sore thumb if we directly translated it into live action. And a lot of thought needs to be put into what designs would actually work. There is nothing that brings you out of a movie faster than something that looks aesthetically out of place, and this is the problem I see with a lot of Japanese live action adaptations. A lot of the times the Japanese adaptation try to mimic the look and feel of the anime or manga without much thought of how it would translate into live action, and the result is, well, you get this shit. If you want any example of how stupid anime can look in real life, just look at most of these adaptations, as there are often many visual aspects that look incredibly jarring with no real thought into costume design and aesthetics. It can sometimes even look like these characters are just cosplayers acting out their favourite anime scenes. Choosing a franchise that is aesthetically more grounded in reality will mean that there are less elements you need to consider when making the transition, but this is not the only thing you need to think about, especially if you're taking an anime series and trying to put it into movie form. Not every series will lend itself to this. For example, as much as people say they'd like to see a Naruto, One Piece or Dragon Ball live action that doesn't suck, adapting long-running shonens may not be the best idea unless we can make multiple films. Long-running shonens normally have a multitude of characters that get introduced in a large time span with a long story separated into arcs. It's no guarantee that every arc would even condense well into a single movie format, and this can be seen even in the shonen franchise films themselves. As try as they might, they often fail to capture the same excitement as you do watching the TV series. Choosing series that can be easily condensed into shorter self-contained stories, or a franchise that is more open for an original plot would allow it to work in different formats. A great example of how to approach these concepts well is the 2014 film Edge of Tomorrow. Now this film is actually an adaptation of the manga All You Need Is Kill, and because the manga is a self-contained short story, it works well as a film. There aren't too many characters, meaning the film has a chance to fully flesh out the characters and concepts it needs to. Not only that, but the visual design was also changed to fit a live action format. The plot depicts a war between humans and alien creatures called mimics. Now in the manga, mimics were these giant rabbit spherical creatures. It worked in the manga as they were scary enough as drawings, but I'm glad someone in the film crew looked at these designs and realized, oh god, these are just massive testicles with teeth. These designs would have looked horrible in live action, and they were rightly changed in the film to a synthetic tentacle bundle which fit the look much better. Edge of Tomorrow never looked or felt like a typical manga, partly due to the source material and partly due to changing what needed to be changed, and because of it, it's one of the only few decent manga adaptations we've ever gotten, which is a crying fucking shame that it tanked in the box office. But even if you manage to get all these steps correct, you'll still fall flat if you don't hit step 3. Understanding what makes the source material work at a core value. This is arguably the most important aspect when it comes to an adaptation, because you can cut, translate, and edit source material all you want, but if you fail to capture the spirit of the original, then you are failing to grasp the backbone of why the source material worked at all, and by doing so you're almost making something completely different. This is what I fear the Ghost in the Shell movie has gotten wrong. See, on the surface, Ghost in the Shell seems to be the perfect franchise to adapt. It has a pre-existing audience, its plot lines lends itself for an original story adaptation, and its aesthetics are something that can be easily translated to live action without much problem. But the core thing that makes Ghost in the Shell such a beloved franchise is the way it explores different philosophical, deep and complex themes, using its setting and characters as a vehicle to explore these themes. Not fucking Total Recall starring Jessica Bourne. Based solely on the trailers and information we have, the franchise has less in common with the movie that's adapting it than it does with The Matrix, a completely original film that was only inspired by it. At a core value, The Matrix managed to take influence of what's made Ghost in the Shell intriguing and weaved it into a whole new franchise. And because of this, it feels more anime than a lot of adaptations that try to be anime are able to achieve. And it's because you can feel its influence at a fundamental level, from its complex philosophical themes it explores in its sci-fi setting, to the action direction and choreography, not having weird aesthetics that are obviously from drawings. The same could be said for Pacific Rim. The reason so many anime fans were drawn to this was because it understood the aspects that made the mecha and kaiju genre so appealing. The cool and unique designs of each mech and monster, the meticulous details of the interconnecting mechanics in the Jaegers that would make any mecha nerd pop a boner, and the excitement and scale of seeing two titanic beasts do battle, translating that to the modern day on the big screen. These two films were made by people who understand why the anime genres they were influenced by were fundamentally appealing, or still paying homage to it, which is why they are so beloved by many in our fanbase. To adapt any anime to a different medium, this is the aspect you need to get right. And while this Ghost in the Shell movie certainly looks like it pays homage to the franchise and gets the look right, at the moment it doesn't look like it understands it at all. You may notice that all the points I've just made can basically be applied to any kind of adaptation, anime or not, and you'd be right. At its core, adapting an anime to live action is no different from adapting a manga to anime, book to film, or the other way round. And the adaptations we remember are in general the ones that manage to hit these core points, which none has been able to come even close at all for anime. And that's the problem. For all the complaints I have about the Ghost in the Shell trailer, it doesn't look bad. It looks forgettable, and as depressing as that may sound, it's actually a big step up to some of the previous adaptations we've had before. Let's be honest, every big franchise anime adaptations we've had has ranged from bad, terrible, to feeling like you want to set your parents on fire. And anime is far from the proven box office seller than, say, comics. Comic book movies themselves have had their fair share of hit and misses before becoming the juggernauts they are today, and even now they can't get everyone right. For us to get to a point where we get a decent adaptation, I think will take time. Anime is so vastly different from most of the stuff Hollywood produces, but that's its biggest strength. Far out world you see in things like Star Wars or Lord of the Rings is complete normality in anime, and it tackles a wide range of topics and themes we don't normally see. Sci-fi, fantasy, music, drama, getting slapped when we walk into the girls' changing rooms. Understanding the weird fundamental appeal of anime is something even a lot of anime fans themselves don't get. We've had good manga adaptations before. Old Boy remains one of the best foreign films of all time, and Edge of Tomorrow was a massive step in the right direction, but neither one of the original source material could come close to being high profile, and that's what I want to see done right. Of course, understanding these factors aren't the only thing stopping a decent adaptation, as you have to consider external resources and studio interference, and it would have been nice if a studio took the risk of adapting Ghost in the Shell with the intention of bringing its complex and mature themes to the mainstream audience, instead of watering it down to be more Hollywood. Of course, the Ghost in the Shell movie may still turn out to be great. I'm just going off the information we have now. But even if my fears are right, and it's not great, and the upcoming live-action Death Note movie sucks too, and the Sword Art Online live-action series tanks, I'm sure eventually someone has to learn, and this live-action curse will be lifted for us anime fans. Right? Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much to Patrick Madsen, Thrones Melt, Lee Watts, Andy Sugiyama, Yuen Feng, Grumpy G-san, I know what you fucking did there, and everyone else on Patreon for helping to support me for this month. Just a heads up that I'm taking some time to work on some bigger projects again, like more anime in minutes or something like the Anime Studios video. As along with all the smaller videos, I like to have bigger projects in the work as well. Until then, if you want to see more of me, you can catch me on Twitter or Facebook, and I'll also be streaming a lot this weekend as well. So you can also catch me on twitch.tv/Giguk. All the links are in the description below. Anyway, that's it from me. I'm from Giguk, and until then, I'll see you all next time.